Okay, I think we're going to begin. Is that okay? Sorry. Welcome to those in our Zoom universe, and welcome to here live. Thank you. Hopefully we'll have a few more people come in. We're grateful for John Ogden being here, came all the way from way down south.
That's right.
Survived the trip. So just go to the website, ThinkAgain-FaithAgain.live for the upcoming speakers. We got Fiona Gibbons and I think Carolyn Pearson is actually next. Anyway, we've got some real fun people coming, and so you want to look for that. And what else? Hopefully you're surviving all the craziness in the world and breathing deep and not getting too riled up about things. So I am going to turn the time over to John, and he can talk a little bit about how we got into this space of creating some curriculum and way helping families and individuals. It doesn't have to be families and children necessarily, but just helping people navigate different faiths and even no faith, and discussions and then teaching at home. So John can kind of explain how he got there and what he's got for us. So John, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Sounds good. Thanks, Jane. Thank you. I'll move this way a bit. Good. Okay. Yeah, and then you'll field questions as well. Right. Okay, great. All right. Well, thanks for coming, everybody. I'd like to make sure this is as much of a discussion as possible. I really feel like I have spent a lot of time thinking about some of these issues, but am a fellow journey person on this road. And so I'm figuring a lot of things out as I go, even as I spend a lot of time thinking about it. Yeah, Jay asked me to talk a little bit about how I got into this. A group of us did a 9-month program. Lisa, or Zaza, is one of the people who participated in a 9-month program through Lower Lights. Lower Lights is a mindfulness community. And a group of us met within that community and started talking about how we liked a lot of the principles that we were discussing there over the course of the 9 months. But we wondered, how could we extend it in homes and how could we extend it to kids, particularly? Because we'd found several different groups that were doing things, including this one, that were for grown-ups. And it's all extremely important and necessary work. And we were just wondering, well, is there any way to carve out space for all ages, even younger kids? And so as part of that, the group of us created a program called upliftkids.org. And Uplift Kids teaches a bunch of values. It's a lesson library and curriculum for families to use. And our intention is that it works regardless of belief or disbelief. And so families can sit down, and it pulls from a range of wisdom traditions, as well as modern science, the emerging science on spirituality. And so that's a little bit of background. So what I wanted to do was really have a free-flowing discussion. But to break into the discussion, what I wanted to do, let me ask really quickly, I didn't check beforehand. Can we break into groups on Zoom if needed? Into break rooms? Okay, great. Let me grab a few things. For those on Zoom, if you'd like, you can go ahead and we'll do breakout rooms for people who would like to do that. 4. So we'll do that in a while. So, and then if you'd rather not participate in a breakout room, you don't feel obligated. That's just a note for the people on Zoom. So to frame up the discussion though, what I wanted to do is talk about some of the principles in our approach that are really not necessarily tied directly to uplift kids. They're not inherent to uplift kids, but really see this as one of the gifts that we're offering through this service, is to give people a framework that they can use to talk about spirituality. Because sometimes in mixed faith situations, or in situations where people have gone through a faith crisis or a faith shift, there can be like an aversion or a sensitivity to spirituality. And so this approach that we articulate is a way to talk about spirituality. And so the first thing in the approach, it has to do with the inner compass. That's kind of the foundational element that we have. And that came from I brought some books that I'll share for those who'd like to read more. This book, The Spiritual Child, it's by a psychologist out of Columbia University. And her name is Lisa Miller. Lisa Miller, she writes about spirituality and the emerging science of spirituality. So she's done neuroscience, and she's doing neuroscience and looking at the neuroscientific evidence for how spirituality works and functions, and how it's tied to well-being. In LDS circles, there's Michael Ferguson, who's working out of Harvard doing neuroscience there, and several others. Andrew Newberg is another one. So there are these people who are studying the brain and then correlating it with spirituality. And Lisa Miller, she's from a Jewish background. She talks about the inner compass in this book. And so that's kind of where we got the idea, this inner moral compass, as language that you could use that could cross like any tradition. So it's like you can still like fully embrace the same conversations that you were having about feeling the Spirit, even if somebody in the family happens to have like, oh, I don't want to talk about feeling the Spirit. You know, it's like just adapting the language slightly and having some flexibility with the language allows you to still have that same discussion, just in different framing. And so Lisa Miller, another way that she talks about it is heart knowing. So you have your inner compass can point you to what is ethical and what is right, and it can help you have a relationship with the divine. And then heart knowing is kind of this listening for the still small voice, might be another way to say it. And so this is the foundation of everything that we do, because this is what you might call like the ground of all being, right? It's like, regardless of any other thing, that any other situation you might get yourself into, or any of the details of the situation, you can return to the inner compass. And so by helping a kid listen for their heart knowing, or listen for their inner compass, or listen for the Spirit, or listen for the voice of God, you know, whatever language you might use at home, the kid gets the same benefits. Lisa Miller points to the fact that, in fact, it's right here on the back of the book, the research shows that children who have a positive, active relationship to spirituality are 40% less likely to use and abuse substances, 60% less likely to be depressed as teenagers, 80% less likely to have dangerous or unprotected sex, more likely to have positive markers for thriving and high levels of academic success. So obviously nothing is a guarantee in life, but there's like this way to help nudge or nurture spirituality, even in a situation where there might be some aversion. So what we're saying is that you can use whatever approach, but the most important thing is getting the spirituality, whatever language somebody happens to use. So that's the first principle that we talk about. Second is combining ancient wisdom with modern science. So we talked about that modern science is emerging, and who knows exactly where it's going to take people over time. But we're hopeful that it's going to keep showing that spirituality is helpful. But ancient wisdom, we talk about this in terms of pulling from all wisdom traditions. So by introducing a kid to a variety of wisdom traditions, you set them up to be able to have a number of different approaches that they can take later on in life, where they don't feel like, oh, I have to because I reject this one, I then have to, and I have to be about the opposite of that thing, because that can lead to an ejection of spirituality overall, and then they don't have it in their life. And so by introducing a myriad approaches or books, traditions, you can hopefully open up a space where even if one doesn't happen to resonate, they still see like, oh, okay, but I still really value spirituality generally in my life. So I have a few here that I wanted to share as well. On that note, that I'll hold up. This book, it's called The World's Wisdom by Philip Novak. And it's a collection. It's kind of like a best of the world's wisdom traditions. It's phenomenal. I've gone through it so many times just because it's just the gems, just the nuggets of all these various traditions. And so it makes for great devotional reading, just like, really sitting with the text and like memorizing it or mulling it over, really letting it sink into your soul. This is phenomenal. And we've been doing something similar for kids on our side. We have a wisdom library where we pull from all the wisdom traditions and kind of give the best of the world's wisdom. And we have, this week, we're publishing a bunch of printouts that families can do to print up around the home to have verses that they might memorize. So these would be like, love your neighbor as yourself. Just simple verses that are from various traditions. Wisdom is more valuable than rubies. Just the simplest gems from every one of these world traditions, whether it be Taoism, Buddhism, Hinduism, Christianity, Judaism, Stoicism, philosophy, etc. So this one's great. Three of my favorite books in this, aside from the Hebrew Bible and the New Testament, are the Tao Te Ching. It's one that you can return to yearly. It's very short. Return to it very often, and just consistently find so much wisdom in it. This particular translation happens to be by Ursula K. Le Guin, who is a science fiction writer, whose fiction you can tell is heavily influenced by Taoism, and she's phenomenal in that she sets up tensions that play out without the protagonist having to kill the antagonist. So she's very interested in how do you tell a story without having it be, the good guys conquered the bad guys, and they got what was coming to them. And that is a very Taoist idea as well, is like how do you go with nature rather than having to strain against nature. Another translation that is simple to read is Stephen Mitchell's. So there are many translations of the Tao Te Ching, but it's a phenomenal text. The Buddhist text is the Dhammapada, which just means the verses of the Dharma, which is Buddhist teaching. And so this is probably the most accessible text that is attributed to the Buddha. And so I'll just read. Let's see. Let me grab just any verse right here, right at the beginning. This one. Our life is shaped by our mind. We become what we think. Suffering follows an evil thought as the wheels of a cart follow the oxen that draw it. And so they're like proverbs, essentially, Buddhist proverbs. And they typically will come like mirror images to each other. So there's that one that I just read. And then it says, again, our life is shaped by our mind. We become what we think. And then instead of suffering, it says joy. Joy follows a pure thought like a shadow that never leaves. And so you get these complementary opposites throughout the whole text. But it's a phenomenal, just another devotional text where you can just sit with it. And then this one, the Hindu Bhagavad Gita, which is essentially an excerpt of extremely long epic text. But this Bhagavad Gita is a story of a warrior who's talking to Krishna, and having to wrestle with the fact that he's being called to war with his own cousins. And so it's like the inner tension that happens in his heart as he has to wrestle through this. So it's all a metaphor for the, resolving internal conflict in your own hearts. So these are just a handful of texts, but our hope is that by widening the circle of what is considered wisdom, you can reach people who have various beliefs, and you can even reach people who have maybe formerly been antagonistic. Because if you sit with these texts long enough, eventually you circle back to, oh wait, the New Testament is also saying this, and the Hebrew Bible is also saying this, and you kind of fall back in love with some of the verses that you may have overlooked. And so it's a way to have beauty in the home without necessarily having it just be about a single text. And I think it sets anybody up well for what Richard Rohr calls the second half of life, where you realize like, oh, the world is bigger than I thought it was. So by doing that early, we're hoping to plant the seeds that transition to the second half of life isn't so jarring like it is for so many people in a like traditional conservative, maybe LDS circle, where people call it faith crisis because it feels like a crisis. Everything is melting down. And so maybe that transition will go a little more smoothly with setting up this way. These other ones I'll go through more quickly. The third one is strengths. We say that everybody has their own unique set of strengths. And part of spiritual living is to be in tune with your particular gifts and your particular passions and your particular calling. And so keep returning to that. What is my personal calling? What is my purpose in life? We might not be able to say declaratively like what the purpose of life is in every instance for everybody ever, but we can tune back into, well, what is my purpose? And then also recognizing that will change over time. We have periods of life. What's my purpose in life for this period? And if we can be really in tune with that, we can find ground again and have collective understanding. Fourth is polarities, and this is complementary opposites. And so we say that any virtue held too tightly becomes a vice. So one example that Aristotle uses is caution and courage. He says that if you hold to caution too tightly, you're paralyzed. You're sure you're playing it safe, but you're not growing because you're so cautious. But if you hold too tightly to courage, it turns into recklessness. You're willing to just do anything, on the cutting edge, you're just going to do it. And so a healthy practice is to have values that are in conversation with each other. So it's just a very simple practice of opposites, naming complementary opposites. And it can also happen with emotions, as emotions work together. We do a lot of emotion practice with kids. We have emotion cards. Like how do you navigate emotions and conversation with each other? So that's that one. Then the fifth is development, recognizing that everybody as you grow up, you're in a stage of development, and you have to cater from your stage of development to the stage of development of the kid. Sixth is lineage, meaning that we all come from someplace, and we all have stories from our ancestors. And by knowing these stories, we can have higher well-being. So we found a lot of research that shows that kids who know where they came from have higher well-being. These researchers have found, like one specifically had 20 questions that they asked kids, and they mapped it to various markers of well-being. And they found that the kids who knew like how their mom and dad met, where their grandparents are from, those stories actually had a sense of resilience that helped them in many different areas of life. Just keep pointing back to lineage and ancestry and your past stories, knowing where you came from, because those stories work regardless of belief, right? Especially if you rope in all of the stories, the good and the bad, the stories from people who in your past before your family was Mormon, before, you know, whatever it might be. When you rope in all the stories and you create space for everybody there to participate and to really feel like they belong, you know, they're part of this family, they're part of the family story. And then finally, the last one is relationship. So that's what I just said really ties in with this. The most important thing really in all of this is to have relationship. Lisa Miller talks about spirituality as a relationship with the divine, whatever you call it, whether it's nature, the universe, God, heavenly parents, and relationship with each other. And so it can really be a guidepost in having spiritual experiences in the home, to say like, okay, we're going to do what will actually nourish our relationships, rather than we have to get through this lesson, we have to get through this content, you know, we have to make sure we teach these principles. It's like, no, set that aside. In the end, it's just like, is this helping our relationship or not? And so those are the 7 points of our approach, and they're really meant to be universal. They're not specific to Uplift Kids. So I wanted to talk through some of these. I want to talk about, just have a discussion here about what you've seen work. First, I can ask, like, did any of these 7 points, just to reflect on it, just to think about, like, have you seen any of these 7 approaches play out in your family? And it could be a story where it didn't work well, you know, it didn't land, or it could be a story where it really did go, well. I'll share one to start. One of the lessons that we have is about grandparents. So we had my sons and my spouse called up my in-laws, and we had a conversation. We had, you know, these questions that the researchers say, you know, if the kids know the answers to these questions about higher well-being, as well as some other questions. And so we just had a conversation that really unfolded naturally, as, you know, we started with some of the questions and then branched out to others. And it just enabled us to get to stories that we had never talked about. You know, I've known them for a long time now, you know, nearly 15 years, and my son just turned 12, but there were still lots of stories that we'd never heard because we'd never done this formal practice. And so that's just one example of a time when, you know, when we wrapped that up, it felt like really spiritually uplifting. So maybe we can start with that. Those who want to, on the Zoom, if you want to break into groups of 4, and well, I don't know how many people are joined, so you can manage that however you want. The people on the Zoom can decide to break into groups and talk amongst people on the Zoom call. And then the people here, maybe we can do, I don't know, 4-ish, 5-ish, whatever, maybe either 2 or 3 groups here. And just talk about when is an experience that has worked well in your family. And if you all agree, because the name of this talk is like talking when you disagree, maybe your family all agrees, and that's great. You can still talk about a time when it worked well. But when is a time when it has worked well in your family, like a spiritual discussion?
You talked about 7, right?
Yeah.
I don't remember all 7.
You don't have to remember.
Or did you just rehearse them?
I can, yeah, and you can also just forget them if you want. But they're inner compass, ancient wisdom and modern science, strengths, development, polarities, lineage, and relationships. So maybe they inspire something for you, maybe they don't. Either way, Think about when is a time when you've had a spiritual discussion that went well with your family. Yes, if you'd like, you can click on and go to the breakout rooms. But if you're feeling like you'd rather not, you also you're not required.
I have a question.
Yeah.
That is the word spirituality.
Mm.
It doesn't work anymore with many others.
Yeah.
And so what's the other term? You know, we have
Yeah.
a spiritual discussion. Well, what does that mean? It's
Yeah.
a trigger.
Yeah. Yeah. If you said it formally, hey, everybody, let's gather around for a spiritual discussion. You'll be like, right. Yeah, it might not work, right? No, that's a great point. I think that another word that is in the zeitgeist is vulnerable. Like with Brene Brown, vulnerability, having a vulnerable discussion, a heartfelt discussion. Does that make sense? And then that, you know, in LDS circles, they do overlap a lot. You know, it's like, oh, I really felt the spirit. It's like, oh, but people were just being vulnerable. And well, it's like, okay, but you don't have to parse it so much. They're very similar in tenor. They can, yeah. Yeah, true.
Kids are trained. There's some resonance. That is the spirit.
Sure.
So I like the vulnerable and maybe vulnerable in service of the relationship.
Sure. Yep.
Go back to
Yeah.
the
Yep.
So that's kind of what we're
Yeah.
without the label spiritual.
Yeah. If spiritual doesn't work, drop it. I mean, it is a term that can be divisive in and of itself. Absolutely.
Yeah, many years since we had our family is spiritual.
That's fair. That's fair.
And she was very interested, felt the spirit, felt the softening of her, because we were looking at photos of people she had seen before. They were old enough photos that I rediscovered that I hadn't seen before, so I was excited.
Yeah.
My excitement. And Kristen and I were talking about the power of generations. People that I don't know who have ancestry, but desire to know. So I find out stories or look at photos and really look into those faces. I can feel that connection that has a shift for me.
Same.
So I think sharing a personal experience like that with a child, even an adult child.
Absolutely.
Are adopted, so they have all sorts of where do I belong feelings and questions.
Yeah. Should we touch base really quick? Do we need to do anything with that? Okay. So they're talking amongst themselves. So, okay. All right. Would we want to stay as one group or would we want to split? Any preference? Okay. All right. So let's stay as one. I do know this is going to be recorded, so maybe speak up just so that if somebody does watch it, they can hear. But yeah, let's just stay as one and have it be a open discussion. I found that same thing that and like opening up a scrapbook or a memories book is more palatable way than say again, everybody, let's gather for a spiritual discussion. Just like, hey, have you seen this book? Have you, let's look at it together and look at some past memories. And you're right, like I felt that same experience, like, wow, this is really touching to see this connection and want to learn more about my ancestry. So that is one way to go about it. It's a great example. Any other examples come to mind?
You know, our daughter lives in St. Croix. She lives some years. But our two boys and their wives and our grandkids come over most Sundays for dinner. James put together for them. And before we had the grandkids, you know, Jane and I take turns with prayers. I have odd, she has even. And we would give a prayer, you know, today it was for me. And, you know, they're all atheists, but they're okay with that. Push back on that. But then Liberty decided, she's 4.5 now, but she's done this for about a year or so. She decided she wanted to pray. And so her prayers are really fun, and they're very different. Not traditional LDS prayer. Very enthusiastic. And she just starts out, oh, my mom, I love TV, I love them, just all these love things. And then her mom will kind of nudge her. You know, they grew up in the LDS tradition. So, and then it's her favorite part is just this big amen. And it's just everybody just looks at each other and laughs. I mean, our eyes are open. We're enjoying it. We're enjoying her, her innocence, and we call it good. Call it good. So that's, I suppose, our most spiritual family moment that we have on the great occasion.
Yeah,
it's sweet that our granddaughter is the one that does that.
That is, yeah, that's sweet. Yeah, it sounds like a heartfelt expression, which is another way to talk about spirituality, just like what's heartfelt.
Yeah, heartfelt, and there's some comic nature about it, which is fun. So.
Yeah, it's a great example.
And it's great that they allow her to do that and kind of encourage her. You know? Not being believers in God, so we appreciate that.
Yeah, wonderful example.
I think for, because all of our kids are adults, and I come up back and try to guess what of the things that we did when they were little seems to have stuck. And it's crapshoot. I have no idea. I really have no idea.
Yep.
And but I think that the spiritual aspect for me in seeking those kinds of interactions, conversations, is over the years it's letting go of anything that has to do with, I guess what I call shadow comes up. And usually if I'm resisting what's going on here for me, if something is fulfilling or inspiring, what's going on for me, and if something's not, or I'm feeling disconnect from, especially in one relationship. The practice seems to inform me to, okay, what am I taking on in the middle? Not like, how's this my fault? But what am I taking on when there's disconnect, or when there are differences? And I think one of the most challenging and yet at the same time, is to realize I literally cannot in any way, shape, or form get what's going on for someone else. I can guess, I can try to understand, I can empathize, but never will it work for me to really say, I know what they're thinking, I know why they did that, or assigning any kind of level of blame, responsibility, credit, reason. It just increases the disconnect.
when you're tied to the outcome or tied to how they're feeling?
Well, it's all tied up and I want them to do this, so I need to get them to think this. Or it's tied up in me thinking, well, this is why they did that, or they're trying to get.
Right.
They're trying to hurt me, or they're trying to get me to, assigning anything.
Right, yeah.
Even if it's, they did that because they love me.
Yeah. Yeah.
I want that,
Yeah.
but, and I realize I'm gonna do that, we do this.
Mhm.
We want to have an answer as to why this happened, definitely
Yeah.
in our relationships. We want to have an answer as to why the relationship is the way it is. I think especially as a parent. This is what
Sure.
we do. We really, really want to know why, so that we can do something.
Right.
And it just, noticing I do that, but also letting go of having to do that. Or that is what will make a difference.
Yep.
Is kind of part of the spiritual work. Because
Mhm.
more than anything, that's when I sense the divine presence of oneness. When I let go of thinking, I have to know the reason why before I
Mhm.
can really be connected or what I can do. Letting go of needing an answer.
Yeah.
And coming back to just being that, just getting.
So in parallel to that, it seems like is also wanting.
Oh,
Mhm.
I mean, it's very similar to what you're saying. Jan and I found it very valuable just not to do that. I wasn't really helpful. It's hard not to. Once they chose their relationship, well, love them as they are and not worry about the outcome.
well, from the moment you know in whatever way you're doing, you've got outcomes.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's right there. And then from that moment, it's a constant. Oh, it's not turning out.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Onto this in a death grip and
Yeah.
live someone else's life.
Yeah.
You're. The outcome just be there.
Yeah. If I may say just fairly quickly, your story is reminding me of a story that I heard that has really stayed with me. And there's a story of a man who was talking about his relationship with his son, who had gotten addicted to drugs and was in a very, very bad place. And he kept just wanting, no, stop. You gotta shape up. You gotta change your life around. You just kind of drilling into him like that. And he talked about the moment that it all shifted for him was when he'd been told this line, like, you just have to be and love. And there was a moment that he talked about when it finally clicked for him, and he let go of the outcome, and he was like, he just was able to transmute his love in that moment to his son, and it kind of softened his son in a way that for the first time the son was able to relax into the love and actually feel like, oh, I feel that love. Lisa Miller talks about the field of love, and that's another way to talk about spirituality, a field of love. And she says that is spirituality, the field of love. And if you can keep that field of love present, whatever direction, if there's a certain way that you're going about it that keeps causing static in the field of love, let go of that. It's like, okay,
Disconnection.
Disconnection. It's like, okay, that's not contributing to the field of love. So we get these stories in our mind, like, this is the way it's going to be, right? And I have it spelled out here, and we're very sensitive to that. Even at Uplift, it's like Uplift isn't the solution. Uplift points you to the solution, And hopefully, if it's getting in the way of the solution, uplift, drop whatever it is, because whatever you want is that field of love, because that's what actually transforms a human being. Feeling that presence, feeling that love. That's where the transformation happens.
So, yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
Just to stick with this, so how long are we going to these people? Well,
They came back?
Okay.
Okay. Just so you know, if you're on Zoom, feel free to chat in comments if you'd
Yes,
like.
great. Okay.
Well, you touched on it, and there's just such beauty, accepting and loving who, I'll just say, ignorance and sexually become, there's just such freedom in that.
Mm.
Of beauty
Mhm.
that is also unexpected.
Mhm. Yeah.
I think maybe the answer is in what you just said, but I was just talking to a relative who, you know, it's all science, you know, it's all chemicals, and there is no food, you know, which I totally get. And, but you say, well, what is the purpose? I realize that you can raise these kids and to raise up with what's the point. And I don't have an answer at all, except I like what you're saying, is that you can be transferable. There it is.
In terms of purpose.
Yeah, because, you know, you're working with kids who are still, you know, you're saying, here's these different things, it's wonderful, nourishing them with that, but when someone has grown up and made them mind up about things. How do you know they made up their mind? Well,
They act like it.
so, I think that's just part of it, is the transformative power of love, for me, at least in my interactions with God and divinity and love that's beyond language, is that there's always more room. There's more room for something to show up that you haven't already made up your mind about. So again, as a parent, it's been really tough when I think my kids have. Well, they made up their mind and they're closed off to what I think would be better. I'm closing myself off, having room for them to be going through whatever they're going through, finding whatever they find. Just because it's not what I expected. It's not what I thought their life would look like. It's not what I thought our relationship would be. The temptation is to close off and make it online. But that's the opposite of having that kind of love. Because the love that I experience that is beyond the trite ways we describe it, is that there is room for more than I imagined, including room for them to always be dreaming. They might show up in ways that I could not have expected in a minute or in 30 years. But they're definitely not going to be any different if I've already decided they are what they are, and that's it. Then I have no room. And I'll miss it. All I have room for is them not being what I expect them to be. And that's all they can ever be. It's not what I expect them to be.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really beautifully said. Any other ideas for this question? I think that was a great answer, great response. Any thoughts about this question or others?
Sorry.
Yeah, you're good. As I understood it, it's that you know somebody whose kid said that a relative of yours said, I don't see the purpose of life.
This is an agnostic.
Science driven.
Yeah.
You know, I see that I see serving people.
Yeah, purpose. Yeah. I was just at a book club like at 6 p.m. today. I'm reading this book that it talks about science as a reductionist process where you break everything into constituent parts to study it. And that's the beauty of science, is that you can do it in a laboratory. You break everything down into small parts. And then if you can get it small enough, you can study one specific thing, and you can figure out one specific thing. And that's how science works, little by little by little. But science taken too far becomes, you have a reductionist worldview, is the argument of the book, which is that you're not studying wholes. And so because you're not studying wholes, WHOLES, only studying parts. And the book talked about how the second law of thermodynamics is that it talks about entropy, like everything's headed towards entropy. There's going to be a heat death, and everything is going to end. And that's the way the world is going to be. And that's the myth or the story that science tells. And the argument of the book is that, but what we see the opposite evidence happening all around us, which is more and more order. If you look over the past millions of years, there's far more order in the world now than there was back then. And the argument said that when the person talked about entropy, they did it in a closed system, meaning that there wasn't any input of energy in the system. And so when they studied it, it did always end in more and more entropy. But we are not in a closed system. There's more energy coming from the sun at all times. And so they're talking about this emerging science that is saying, if you study wholes rather than just parts, you get an inkling of patterns, and you get an inkling that actually works in the opposite direction of entropy, which is more and more order over time. And it doesn't give us the answer to what is the purpose of life, but it does say, like, maybe the reductionist view isn't sufficient. It's a useful tool, but not sufficient. And there's more mystery to the process. This likely isn't an answer to a direct answer to your question. I've been thinking about it today because it kind of opened me up to, like, oh yeah, I have implicitly at times kind of adopted that worldview of, like, well, I could have my nice theories, but we all know it's going to end in a heat death. And this book kind of like said, hey, wait a second, that's not necessarily even an educated position. Nevertheless, I'll say more directly as an answer to your question about purpose. I personally think of it in terms of projects, meaning I don't know what my ultimate purpose is. I feel agnostic about that personally. Like, what is my ultimate purpose? I have hopes, for ultimate purpose, but I have to, if I'm completely honest, I have to say, like, I don't know what my ultimate purpose is, but I do have a sense enough to see the next step in what's my purpose. And so for me, this is directly related to Uplift. Like it was, I might say in LDS vernacular, like a revelation. Do this for now and see where it goes. And so that's ground enough, or that's light enough as I'm seeing in the dark to say, like, my purpose right now is this thing. And I'm going to live that out until I see the next thing that arises. And that's another way to be in a family relationship, right? We might not know, your kids certainly are not going to turn out the way that you envisioned when you first had them. And even as a relatively young parent, I'm 100% certain of that already. Yet I can say, at this time of my life, this feels alive. This kind of activity feels alive. This way of being intentional together feels alive, rather than, we've all experienced, like, the mindless or numbed feeling of being at a family gathering where nobody's really connecting, and it's just kind of like, yeah, take it or leave it. So it's in this conversation, it's a matter of listening in, whatever language we use, again, the still small voice, whatever we say, to, well, what what would be intentional in my family at this time? And what would it look like to be alive together at this time? And leaning into that, whatever that might look like. Yeah, absolutely.
As a young person who's gone through lots of nihilism, existential terror, climate change and capitalism and all that stuff, in terms of purpose, at least, is that I think that the purpose of life is self-referential. Life is the purpose. And that as long as we're looking outside of life for a purpose, we're going to miss the life currently. And that's very Adam Miller, that's very Buddhist, it's very Taoist, it's very Stoic. And that the purpose of our life is whatever it is we find ourselves doing. And to be able to do whatever it is, whether it's washing dishes, whether it's jumping off a cliff, something grand, something mundane, it doesn't matter as long as we're there intentionally, and that is the purpose. It's almost that Mary Oliver, we've got this, what are you gonna do with your life? And because, for all we know, this is all of our experiences right here. Like, we're not complete some grand mystery, but for the present moment, this is my present moment, and I need to be able to show up in it fully. And so the purpose of life is to redirect me back to right here, into whatever it is I'm doing with intentionality. And that's kind of what I got from these expanded wisdom texts, right? Once I broadened my scope to be beyond just this limited scope of what I can accept as divine truth, that's when I understood Eastern spirituality. This more present, centered, more near-sighted spiritual practice is Eastern spirituality.
Yeah. One of the most transformative passages from the Bhagavad Gita says, "He who is tied to the outcomes is forever miserable." Because you cannot control the outcomes, right? But you can be here. You can return back to being here.
Yeah, being here is it's both beautiful and tragic, because that means a lot of our world tries to separate us from our experiences, our own experience of ourselves, and how much of our day-to-day experience is just distraction. Be distracted from what I'm experiencing right now, especially when what I'm experiencing is negative, right? We want to look away from pain, we want to look away from sadness and tragedy, when I think what the more present-centered spirituality asks us is to be awake to it. Because the better we can be awake to our pain, the better we can be awake to our happiness. And that, anyways, so when wrestling with grand purpose of the universe, I think that the grand purpose of the universe actually wants to direct us back to the little purpose of our lives. And then, we kind of get caught up in the flow of all things if we can just let go of our expectations of grand capital B purpose.
No, this is from Martina.
Really loud.
Listening in on this conversation, my thoughts are being led to generation trauma. I believe that if we work on ourselves and heal the parts that have hurt us, we can find our purpose, our miseries, our ministry. And I think this leads to being an example for others as well, an example of love for self.
Yeah, thanks, Martina.
Yeah. So it seems like where we are in this kind of general moment of time, we've been for several years, moving away from more of a communal, formal religious feel to a ritualistic type approach. It's a little bit what I say. And I'm wondering if it doesn't have to be either or, but the beauty would be both. at the same time, because none of us are independent. And I'm listening to a book that has scientists extended mind. And it's amazing how we think of our brains as these little computers. That's a terrible analogy. It just doesn't work. Because our minds are connected to everything all the time around us. Going forward, going past, and going to this present, this room. And our mind is always drawing on those resources. And so, kind of back to where we started with spirituality, feel love, feel love. And how does that, what in our personal thinking practices serves that, both for ourselves and for our communities, all the way down to children. Because we can't just divorce yourselves from each other. This doesn't work. Right.
Yeah.
And then, like, if we try to do that, then we start. So there is a concern on my part that we don't gather enough in real time to talk about things that matter. Try to have the field of love moment.
Yeah, it's my primary concern as well. I have that. I'm very, very concerned about what you just said, like individuality as being ultimately a dead end in and of itself. If that's all that there is, a bunch of individuals, feels very empty, doesn't feel spiritually enlightening or nourishing, really. And so I feel very strongly that we do need communion. And yet it's very difficult in situations like we've described here, where there are differing beliefs, strong feelings about differing beliefs. And so one option is just like, forget it. Let's all just hold it in and not talk about any of it, right? I see that as, again, a dead end. I see that as not what any of us really want in our heart of hearts. Not even people who are like staunch, hard atheists. In their heart of hearts, they don't really want that. Right. They just don't want to be lectured to about like a dogma, right? Yeah. And so they're reacting, and they're saying, no, stop with the dogma. I don't want that anymore. But all of us crave human connection and deeper connection. We want that so much. Even when we might be scared to admit it. And so this is the question that is the question that's in my heart is, how do we empty words to use them again? So if a word is like a vessel, say the word God. For some people, as soon as you bring up the word God, it's instantly triggering. It's like, there you go, back to the dogma. I don't want this anymore. And then you can't have the conversation anymore. How do we pour out that word of its contents so that we can use it again? Yeah. Yeah. Sure. Exactly. And so let me see if this resonates at all, but I'd love to hear more of what you're saying. If you find that a word doesn't work, like spiritual, is there another word of the 12 possible near synonyms that might be an entryway into what people actually want, which is a heart-to-heart conversation? And then maybe over time, the word has been emptied for the other person, where it's like, when I say God, I mean love. I mean, whatever it might be, and we can use the word God again without people's hackles raising and they mean like, ugh, right? But it might not. That word might not be on the table for now, right? I don't know if that relates at all to what you're saying.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
think we can just make as much effort as possible and still. They're
Mhm.
not,
Yeah,
or if they want to, maybe we don't want to.
yeah. Have you seen it work in that situation? Have you seen a way to navigate that situation?
Yeah, similarly, find something else that maybe is less activating for yourself.
Mm.
Yeah, and I mean, I think people for the most part are pretty like gracious. Like,
Yeah.
I can meet you there.
Yeah.
You know, Jane and I have had the last, I don't know, almost a year, a group of people that gather around music.
Mhm.
And they're a very diverse group. You know, not all, it's a couple of the Catholic tradition here in Utah, which is really hard. One who identifies culturally as one, but you know, would call himself tradition active. And then others, it's Japanese fellow that joins us sometimes. He doesn't really have any particular group. But it's coming together and singing songs. Some of them happen to be old spiritual folk songs. Some of them can be old James Taylor songs.
Mhm.
I mean, there's a wide range of music, but we come together and there is this nourishment. This, to me, feels, you know, to use the word that we're common with, it's spiritual nourishment, but it's the field of love. And we have this text thread that, you know, we share a lot of beautiful thoughts and things. And as a group, we have, you know, circled together and held hands and had, you know, where each of us says something type of prayer.
Mhm.
And we've had some beautiful moments with all this diversity. You know, these are all adults, you know. I'm a kid thing, but I think that idea that everybody, you know, contributes to something that's not built around religion specifically, but trying to have even a specific spiritual moment, but have an encounter of arts and music.
Yeah.
You know, how would you describe it? But it's been really,
That sounds
it's
lovely.
been really lovely.
Yeah.
And again, the text threads, this thing going on, you know. It's a lot of lovely sharing.
Yeah.
And, you know, there's one of them who is agnostic atheist. I've never been involved. But there's just a warmth, there's a feel of love.
Yeah.
That we share. You know, one of them was an energy healer, and she resigned from this church the first year. She had since she was 14. But, you know, she just had such a life of energy and positive way about her.
Yeah.
I would love to work with her. Everybody contributes in their own unique voice in this tiny little community that enriches each other.
Yeah.
It's very fortunate. But it is kind of centered around music. What are you reading?
Oh, yeah, it's just lovely. And I love the difference.
So I guess music was a
Absolutely. Yeah.
So it's a relationship,
yeah,
us with each other, relationship, music, nature,
Mhm.
right.
whatever relationship is. So connect,
Yep.
for the purpose of life. I love, what's your name? Sorry.
That's
Yeah, I love that. So, it's in this room.
Mhm.
Relationship. Like singing.
Yeah. Yeah. One thing that I just keep coming back to in this conversation is that words often get in the way because they have connotations that people can't look past the word anymore. And so music is a way to say like, hey, we're not, the words are pointing to the experience that we want to have, right? And then but music can help with that by like harmonic resonance, I guess. Like you just feel it, and so you're not so caught up cerebrally with what it means, you know.
Yeah.
So,
Such a word.
yeah. Mike, is it Mike?
Yeah, it is.
I'm curious if you have any thoughts.
Well, there's a couple of things that kind of I'm thinking of, and going a lot of different directions. This is really fascinating. You know, that whole concept of words being a container, thought container, a bomb also, but a container, and how we can really. I was thinking about the kind of conversations I had with my own children for years, and very limited when it comes to concepts of spirituality for the most part. Two are children that are really with God and the church. So I've kind of become the extreme one of it all. So I really like the idea of how do we come up with a container that's neutral. That can be powerful. And I was thinking this whole idea of this connected love and feel, and I'm about here, so feel very is kind of a cool thing to me. And it's really kind of an interesting thought that there are those instances where we connect with someone. There's just really this kind of we may call it a spirit, but there's something very, very real about an experience that we connect with people, figure with people. And call love, call it something else, but there's truly something beyond ourselves when we connect with someone else. And both feel something. And so I really like that concept of feel with love. But the idea of words being this container, and they hold something, a thought, an emotion, with that river, is fascinating to think about. Might as well. That's just a couple.
That's great. Thanks for sharing that. As we conclude, I would just encourage each of us to lean into maybe an idea that might scare you a little bit in terms of something you could do to connect. Because if you are entering that place of vulnerability, it's going to, by definition, be a little scary to say like, well, what if I did take this step to connect with somebody who I felt like our connection at a deeper level has just kind of been flatlined? What if I did lean into it? What if I took a risk? Yeah, I mean, reflecting for myself of what comes up, like I might say, my extended family, like there are things that I could do, things that I could say to rekindle connection using new language, but still leaning into the idea of wanting to really connect in an authentic way. I don't know if that stirs anything up for anybody as we close out. Jay, go ahead. I'm going to just connect to this speaker.
So it makes me think, I've had the best success, I've had very limited success, but the success that it feels like I've had is, and it goes with what you're talking about leaning into. It makes me think of when Jesus says, go that extra mile, turn the other cheek, get the clothes, and go into what feels oppositional. And so when I show interest in my children's thinking or books or ideas that may seem very foreign and maybe even adversarial or uncomfortable for them, I'm taking the time to listen to them and also listen to a podcast if they send me, or read a book, it has softened me, and I've been able to find some things that I can appreciate in what they've given me. And they appreciate that I took time and thought to investigate something they put in front of me. And which means they have been more open than I bring something to the table. So that's been valuable. And then I think just, you know, if we can get to a place where we, in our minds and our hearts, where in this field of love, how does Rumi say it?
Yeah, beyond wrongdoing and right.
Yeah, that's right. Where we just set judgment and past experiences, hurts and stuff aside, and we just meet there and just listen and try to accept and not worry. And again, not come with an agenda, but just be there with that person.
Yeah.
I'm working on that. I haven't, you know, long somewhere. I have a sense of the idea. Every once in a while, I manage to pull it. But when I have, to me, for me in my tradition, it's really what Jesus taught. It really does work. Both with family and friends. Yeah. But I wish you were hanging around Gene and I. I wish I had this worldview, but I came out pretty late. I you know, this understanding and stuff. It's sure.
One of the things you said about showing up as a student to your children. Because, you know, as
That's
parents, we are like, we're the teachers.
Yeah.
You know, we're guys, over. And if you show up as a student, wow, that's becoming that makes you.
Yeah, it's really beautiful. And to do it in a way that you are happy if you're able to then say your piece, but you also acknowledge, like, they might not be interested in you saying your piece, but at least you were present, because you have to meet them where they are, right? You have to, oh, you're interested in this? Oh, let me ask about that. You know, let me hear you talk about that. And that might be the only place it goes, but you were fully there for them in hearing what they're interested in, even if it's Pokemon. That's yeah.
There's this fun things. Pokemon,
Yeah.
Anime and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's actually fruits in this.
Yeah.
I don't think it's against or contrary to our LDS tradition. I mean, our LDS tradition is built about relationship. I mean, that's
Yeah.
what Joseph Smith talked about. And so the things that you've expressed in this field of love, does it serve the relationship? You know, I mean, I just think we focus on that. We can feel like we are living our religion as we understand it. And move forward. It may look very unusual and crazy. It's a little offensive to some, but if that's where our hearts, as kind of medicine said, that's where we're called, then we can trust that.
Yeah.
We have a hand raised, we got Walter.
Yeah.
I wanted to share that.
Hold on, Walter. I might wanna-
He's good. You can do it now.
Okay, go for it.
Okay, great. I wanted to share this kind of quote, and I changed one word in it, but here it is. We're fascinated by the words, but let me try again. We're fascinated by the words, but where we meet is the silence between them, or you could say behind them. And so I was just showing up and meeting with other people, and then like whatever they shared, like pondering that time that we take in between. There's like always more than what is said. It's like there's also that feeling and that connection. So just creating a safe place that you can open up and be a facilitator for them, or they can be a facilitator for you to kind of share what's in your heart is just so meaningful and has so much connections and potentially, like, you know, transform your life and your beliefs in making I think us more open to love and understanding each other.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really beautiful. To listen to the space between words, because for all we know, a family member could say something that offends us, that causes us to feel like, oh, don't do it that way. But if we can really listen to, well, what are they actually trying to say? Right. Then that gets back to the thing that you were talking about, Jay. They're trying to share something with you. Maybe they swear or something. Who knows? Who knows what the thing is that causes you to feel offended. Listen through that. Listen to the stuff between it and hear their heart. Any final comments? Jay asked if I would choose a song that we could sing to close out. So speaking of something that might feel slightly uncomfortable, we can lean into that. But are there any final thoughts, comments? My hope here is really that it sparks something that leads you to connect more deeply with somebody you haven't connected with. Period. If you can do that, then this time that we've spent together is phenomenal in my eyes. And I'll be thinking about that as well. I'll have thoughts of scaring me. I'll say, no, not do that. I can't bring that up with my dad, or I can't bring that up with, you know, whoever it might be. But that might be just an indication that, yeah, I should do that. Thank you so much for gathering. Yeah, please, Martina.
Hi. When you just said any final thoughts, a line that my mission president you used to say all the time was just follow the KISS method. Keep it simple, stupid, was the KISS method. And I think there's power to just keeping things really simple in your conversations and not overthinking it. Fear definitely gets in the way. And I think that words get jumbled when fear is in the way. And when you just keep it simple and you come from a space of vulnerability, the people around you, whether it's family that you're talking to or friends, like they will be able to sense that. And the conversations that you're hoping to have will just ebb and flow as you just keep it simple. Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anybody else in the Zoom room that wants to share?
All right, well, we'll close out if not. So we've been compiling songs as part of the Uplift program. So what we want to do is build a library of songs that could hopefully be used in this transcend and include kind of way where it's not hostile to any religion, but it includes many different religions. And we, in addition to the wisdom passages, so we have wisdom passages, songs, or chants. And then what's the other thing that we're building a library for? Wisdom passages, songs, chants, and meditations. So a bunch of meditations that you can use with kids. So it's really a library that families can say like, oh, let's try this. You know, let's see if we like this flavor, I guess, of spirituality. And so this song that came to mind, it fits really well with the idea of emptying out language. It's in Latin. And so that is like one step removed. So the word, you don't have to get hung up on the word, the meaning, but I will share the meaning. The song is called Ubi Caritas. And it says, where there is charity and love, there is God. And it's in Latin, and it's just a chant. And so if we feel comfortable singing it, we'll probably sing it a number of times, over and over and over, just to feel it. And then when it feels like it's lived its life, we'll say goodbye to it. And so I will play it first. I have a 1-minute clip that we recorded with a guy named Lon Young, who's a practitioner at a Sangha in Provo, Buddhist Sangha in Provo.
nice voice.
Yeah, he does. Yeah.
That was your voice.
I wish. And so I'll play it. We'll have the lyrics on the screen, and then we'll listen to it for a minute, and then I'll lead into singing it. We'll just go in rounds to close out. Okay? So I'll hold it up. If you want to sing at home, feel free to sing at home. But here's the song. Deus Divina, Ui caritas et amor, Ui caritas Deus Divina, Ui caritas et amor, ubi caritas Deus sibi est. Keep going with it. Ubi caritas et amor, ubi caritas Deus sibi est, ubi caritas et amor, ubi caritas Deus sibi est, ubi caritas et amor, ubi caritas Deus sibi est, ubi caritas et amor, ubi caritas Deus sibi est, ubi caritas de amor, ubi caritas Deus sibi est, ubi caritas et amor, ubi caritas Deus sibi est. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Gorgeous. Thank you so much, John, for that. Love that ending. It's beautiful. I just sat there in silence for a lot longer. I failed to thank Lisa Cannon for offering her home and chapel to us. It sounded particularly gorgeous in here, didn't it? We should all be monks. I think we could do pretty good doing that monk chant stuff. That was lovely. And thanks for Janice Spengler helping out, offering her account. She wasn't feeling so good today, so couldn't make it. And for Madison Daniels over on the side. And Lynette. I remember Lynette. his girlfriend who helped monitor the Zoom side of things. Appreciate them. It's been a lovely evening. So I'll get this up as a recording pretty soon. We can enjoy it again. You're welcome to send me any ideas that you have for future Think Again, Faith Agains, and look forward to seeing you hopefully in person or on Zoom next month and the month after. I think it's very valuable for us to get together and share our hearts and be vulnerable in this field of love. So thank you. You know, I felt that usually we close out of Faith Again with a closing prayer. Does anybody feel so inspired to want to offer? And they can pray in any way they want. The song? I like that. So the song was the prayer. I love that. So until next time, thank you.